So, Lone Rider here, and I want to talk briefly about the Cold Steel Hutton practice saber. So, I've had this for a while now, and it's it's a fun little thing. Um, there are some criticisms though that I wanted to point out, and the primary one I guess is that the metal seems very corrosion prone. Both the guard as well as the blade have rust spots forming on them all the time. Very shortly after I got this, I noticed this. Now, I happened to get this in the summer, and one could say, well, it's the summer, your hand's going to sweat, whatever. Yes, but I did make sure to clean this off after every time I used it, and I'm frankly surprised that it's so, so prone to it. None of my other swords have been. The second thing is that might explain why when I got it, it came covered in so much grease. The entire thing was, even the guard and the inside of the bowl guard was covered in grease. Sometimes they grease the blade on swords before they ship them. And I have no problem with that in the sense of it keeps the blade from tarnishing or getting rust. But to have the entire guard, even the inside of the guard, slathered with grease, I had to wonder why. Why would somebody do that? And I just thought it was somebody was just being extra careful. Maybe it had to get shipped from far away and they were afraid it was going to rust or something during transit. Well, now I'm wondering if it's because they knew the metal was prone to rust. So that's my main criticism. The guard is a little flimsy. I thought these reinforced edges would help. Maybe they do, but I don't think they help all that much. I would much rather have a more substantial guard. Of course, to get the balance right, if you had a more substantial guard, you'd probably have to have a heavier blade. And then there might be safety issues in terms of, it hits too hard. I don't know. This is a fairly light blade. One of the things I do like about it is I like the fact that it has such a dramatic curvature. If I was going to thrust at the camera, I'm aiming at the camera, but my point's over here. This has a proper curve on it, like a saber should. It's more curved than the Hanwei saber. And the Hanwei Hutton, which this is very similar to, this is the Cold Steel Hutton, has had a lot of criticism from people. Now, the funny thing is, my experience with Hanwei steel is that it's not all that bad. I have my rapier here, and this hasn't shown any rust or corrosion or anything. And I'm very happy with it. And overall, it's a very hefty, thing, and I like it. Now, my Hanwei Practical Norman sword has some nicks in the blade from its first time being used against other swords. Not bad nicks, though. And, swords do get nicks. So, it's not like there's huge chunks taken out of it. Even swords that I'm very happy with, like this rapier, potentially have some issues. What would if I was to use this against a sword with a heftier blade, would there be a lot of edge damage? I don't know. But the one thing I do know about the Hanwei swords is they don't rust very easy, right? They get very good rust. I mean, it's carbon steel, so if you get it wet or you get fingerprints on it, it will rust eventually. But the point is that not the way these do. These are really prone, apparently, to rust. At least my example is. And I'm kind of shocked by that. Because it's one thing to get the hardness right, the tempering right, etc. It's another thing to simply get it so it doesn't rust. That's just based on the chemical composition of the metal, right? And we're not talking making it stainless steel, because that would be bad idea for a sword blade and too brittle usually. I'm simply talking, whatever kind of carbon steel you use, have it be carbon steel that's a little more durable in the face of the elements. Hanwei can do it on a cheap sword that actually costs not much more. You look at the price in these. This cost maybe $20 more or something, right? So, a little more, maybe $30 more. But, they're in the same price range, Cold Steel and Hanwei. So what the hell? I honestly don't know. Now, as far as people saying Cold Steel, some of their knives, like the Triad Lock and stuff, are great, but their swords suck. Mostly that was dealing with fit and finish on, sharp ones and reproductions. I've never had one of those. I've just had this. And the fit and finish on this is fine as far as I'm concerned. You could look at some things and say, well, they're a little rough. But on the other hand, it's a practice sword. You expect it to get dinged up. So, I don't know. I'm glad I got this. It was nice to just have a saber to muck around with. I never, didn't have a saber before, and the idea of what a saber feels like, and how just using a curved sword when you're not used to using a curved sword. I think that's awesome. So I'm glad I got this. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I wish it was better quality. I wish it was more sturdy. I wish it didn't rust as much. On the other hand, it wasn't that expensive. And when you think about that, it's like, really the only thing I could criticize in that sense, in my experience so far, is the rust. Because other companies in that price point that might have their issues as well, but that otherwise produce good swords in terms of they don't just rust just sitting there in the rack. The Hanweis aren't perfect, but they don't rust hanging on a wall. Okay, and it's not like I live in New Jersey, so yeah, it gets hot here. Sometimes it gets humid, but not that humid. And the swords are usually kept inside unless I'm using them. If I'm practicing with it, I usually go out to the garage because I don't want to hit this drop ceiling here. But it's one of those things where I just wish they could have gotten the corrosion resistance a little better. So, what do I think of this? Sometime later, I couldn't really recommend it except as an extremely low budget option. When I got it, I was psyched. I think that's the way with everything. New bike day, new sword day. It's like, oh, dude, awesome! I'm so psyched. And then it's only later you start to see some of the problems with it. Unless they're really glaringly obvious. Like sometimes you see a problem right away. That's usually a bad sign. But this. Am I glad I got it? Yes, because I wanted an inexpensive saber to muck around with, and I'm glad I got that. If I was actually going to take saber lessons, I probably wouldn't. I probably would want something a little more robust or durable, or I don't know, however you want to call it. But that said, it's held up fine so far. I have heard other people say there are some issues. Not sure what. The only one I really noticed was the corrosion, and that's that. So that's the Cold Steel Hutton, and like I said, I wish it was a little more durable and a little more corrosion resistant. But on the other hand, it's a cheap sword, so you kind of get what you pay for in that regard. Would I recommend this? Again, if you're on an extreme budget and you go into it knowing that there's going to be some problems, in particular with corrosion resistance, fair enough. You go into it knowing that you're not going to get, the most durable sword in the world. But if you buy it thinking it's going to be built like a tank or something, no. So, Lone Rider out, and that's just my follow-up on the Cold Steel practice saber. Again, do I regret buying it? Not really, because I wanted a saber, but I wish that I had a budget option for something a little better. That's all. Lone Rider out.